The William W. Hay Railroad Seminar Series is sponsored by the Rail Transportation and Engineering Center here at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And on behalf of all of us, we thank AAR, BNSF, CN, Union Pacific, and especially Hanson Professional Services for their ongoing support of Rail Tech and this seminar series. It's greatly appreciated by those of us here on campus as well as those participating via the internet. And I want to welcome all the people who've registered for this seminar. They hail from many countries and companies. This list includes attendees from freight and passenger railroads, transit organizations, federal and state agencies, engineering firms, universities, research organizations, technology developers and suppliers, and many others. And we're very pleased that you could join us today. Those of you who wish to receive PDHs for your participation, please see the instructions in the email announcement and email hayseminar, Hayseminar, at illinois.edu with your information as described in the announcement. So railroad capital projects present a variety of planning, design, and construction challenges for engineers. And the Springfield Rail Improvements Project is no different. But despite the magnitude of the project and the need to coordinate with a multitude of stakeholders, the project emerged as an excellent example of successful collaboration between public and private stakeholders. The Springfield Rail Improvement Project involves consolidating and improving 2 rail lines onto a single, improved and expanded corridor where Norfolk Southern, Union Pacific, and Amtrak will all operate together. Key elements of the project include many new underpasses, eliminating numerous grade crossings, and a new transportation center serving Amtrak and the Springfield Mass Transit District. The project is also a critical element of the Chicago-St. Louis High-Speed Rail Improvement Program. Our speaker today is Michael Mendenhall. He joined Hanson Professional Services in 2002 and currently serves as a senior structural engineer in their Springfield office. Mr. Mendenhall has many years of experience in planning, structural design, construction plan development, and construction support for both highway and railroad bridge projects. He's an alumnus of the University of Illinois, where he earned his BS in civil engineering in 2002. He's a licensed professional engineer, a licensed structural engineer, and has a number of professional affiliations, including membership in the American Council of Engineering Companies, the ASCE, the Illinois Society of Professional Engineers, and the National Society of Professional Engineers. Please join me in welcoming Michael, who will present today's Hay Seminar, Springfield, Illinois Rail Improvements Project.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. It's quite an honor to come back to the college I was able to graduate from nearly 20 years ago and present on a project that I've been heavily involved with since 2013. I've been at Hanson 20 years. This has taken up a pretty good portion of my career at Hanson. And it's right in my hometown, right where I work. So it's a pretty neat thing. So thank you for everyone attending today, both in person and online. So what is the project? It's a consolidation of a 6-mile stretch of corridor with the Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern, along with upgrades to the Canadian National Corridor as well. In Springfield, there are 3 north-south rail corridors. On the map that you guys can see, on the very far left-hand side is the Union Pacific corridor. That's what we call the 3rd Street corridor because it parallels 3rd Street within Springfield. In the middle is the 10th Street Norfolk Southern corridor, and then on the right-hand side is the 19th Street CN rail corridor. In all, Springfield has 68 at-grade crossings, which is a pretty significant amount for a town of about 120,000-ish. It's a pretty high per capita for at-grade crossings. So anytime where you have vehicles and trains, there's always a potential of an accident. In 2010, we did some investigation to determine there's about 35 trains a day going through Springfield. Moving forward to 2030, there's going to be an anticipated 81 trains per day. A pretty significant growth for the Union Pacific, and that's really related to high-speed rail, as well as a intermodal facility that was constructed several years back in the town of Joliet. So pretty significant increase in both freight and rail traffic through Springfield on the 3rd Street corridor. The 10th Street corridor is where the Norfolk Southern is at. There's a pretty modest increase in train traffic that's expected there. and the Canadian National Corridor is a little bit less traveled with a kind of a minor increase in train traffic. So in all, we're looking at going from 35 trains per day up to 81 trains per day in the 20 years. So rail consolidation in Springfield has been talked about since the 1920s. So it's been around for about 100 years. There was a city plan that I'll discuss a little bit back in the 20s that talked about the consolidation of rail. Nothing really ever happened from that other than some at-grade crossings were constructed. In the 70s, there was another project that was completed that, we have a technical issue. Okay. So in the 70s, there was another project it was the Capital City Rail Relocation Authority that was started. And in that, it talked about the consolidation of rail in Springfield as well. Moving forward a little bit into the 80s and 90s, part of that project was implemented and we were able to work on it. And then in 2003 to 2005, we were involved with kind of a feasibility study of looking at consolidation in rail. And then shortly after that, IDOT got $1.2 billion for the high-speed rail program. So since that timeline, we've been very heavily involved with the engineering side from early on, kind of an environmental aspect from 2009 to 2012 and phase one planning type engineering to actual real design starting in 2013 through right now. So this is a picture of the city plan from 1925 that was created. Back then it was anticipated to consolidate rail. It was going to cost $1.5 million. That's a far cry from a project now that we're talking about that's very close to $500 million. Within that plan, on the far left-hand side of the screen, shows the existing rail corridors through Springfield in 1925. There are a lot of black dots that you can see on that map. That was the number of fatalities. I believe it was 64 people from 1908 to 1922 were killed in Springfield, just at rail crossings. That's a pretty significant amount. And we still have some of that issue today along the different corridors in town. When we get complete with the project, we expect it to be much safer and be a lot better place to live for the citizens. On the right-hand side of this screen is kind of the plan that they prepared to consolidate rail back in the 20s. It utilized the 19th Street corridor to kind of go around Springfield. So back then, Springfield was a lot smaller. The 19th Street corridor was kind of on the outside of town. So that's why that was utilized, at least according to that plan, to consolidate rail. None of that consolidation really took place. There are a few rail lines through the history of Springfield that kind of dissolved and weren't utilized anymore. But in the 30s, there were some underpasses built to promote safety within Springfield because there were so many people getting killed. This is one of them that we're actually going to talk about today. It's the South Grand Avenue underpass. It was constructed in the 30s. You'll kind of see there's some concrete slope walls on the two sides that are still there today. Those are going to be reconstructed and that whole underpass kind of redone. Down the middle of the road was an old trolley line. That no longer exists. But back in that period of time, there were trolley lines through the city of Springfield as well. Moving forward to the 70s, there was the study that was completed by the Capital City Rail Relocation Authority. This was looking at consolidating rail as well in Springfield. And what they looked at that time, Springfield had grown quite a bit, so now the 19th Street corridor that they looked at consolidating rail to back in the 20s was well within the city limits of Springfield. So this kind of looked at bringing the trains around the east side of Springfield. Part of that consolidation was completed, not the whole thing by any means, but a small component of it was. The total cost of the overall consolidation was going to be $78 million. So within Springfield, we've got 3 north-south parallel rail corridors, 68 at-grade crossings, traffic that's going to more than double on the rail, speeds that need to increase for the UP corridor as well. And then the objective of this is basically determine what's the best location to consolidate rail within Springfield and make this a very livable corridor where people can commute from the east side to the west side or the west side to the east side in a safe manner. The study limits of the project was from Stanford Avenue, which is in the southern part of Springfield, to Sangamon Avenue, which is in the northern part of Springfield. The 3rd Street UP corridor looks a lot like this through town. Very narrow houses on both sides. You get in the downtown area, there's more buildings and things, but a very small corridor. You can see people kind of cross the tracks at will wherever. That becomes a huge safety issue, and that's why currently there's still people, even within the last year, I think there's been 2 people killed within the corridor. This is the rail corridor that we're looking at relocating over to another corridor. Just some other pictures of the 3rd Street corridor. Very narrow again. You've got homes on both sides, yards right next to it, so very tight corridor. And within the 10th Street corridor is where this picture was taken. That's where the Norfolk Southern is at. This is the absolute last thing that we want to see in our town. There was a Norfolk Southern train one day that had to stop. I think there's a repair or something that they had to make. And this family right here was trying to get to the Sangamon County Building Complex in Springfield for a court hearing. They couldn't get there because the track was stuck on the rails. And they were coming from the east side, needed to go to the west side of the tracks. So they literally, their entire family crawled underneath the trains to get to the other side. So we studied from about 2010 to 2012 of how to consolidate rail within Springfield. And what we determined is we ought to shift the 3rd Street tracks over to the 10th Street tracks. So the 3rd Street tracks were the ones that were on kind of the far left-hand side of the screen, and looking at shifting those over to the 10th Street corridor. This is just kind of a map of what that would look like. It would reduce the at-grade crossings significantly in Springfield from 68 down to 32, would require construction of 8 new underpasses, reconstruction of 4 existing underpasses, and 1 new overpass. Now, doing this, obviously the corridor's got to get wider, so there's a lot of property acquisition that has to occur. About 42 acres of property, over 100 residential displacements, 50 commercial displacements, quite a few different access changes, but there is a significant noise reduction in shifting the corridor from 3rd Street to 10th Street. 2 parts to that is you're obviously getting rid of one rail corridor and bringing it over to another one. So you mitigated a lot of sound along that corridor. But in addition to that, we're looking at implementing a quiet zone through the city of Springfield where the trains don't sound their horns, or we minimize the amount of time the trains sound their horns. So why is the project needed? To promote pedestrian and vehicular safety. I've already kind of talked about the issues with a lot of the pedestrians. Reduce congestion and delays, and this project would reduce congestion by about 80%. So not only are you able to get through town easier, there's a lot less emissions as well that are created, so there's environmental benefits to this as well. Eliminate train horn noise and increase the economic growth of Springfield. And we're not talking about a very minor increase, just within the hospitals of Springfield, talking about close to $1 billion in economic growth that removing the 3rd Street corridor and putting it over to the 10th Street corridor will promote. So very significant for the city. The project is split into 6 different usable segments. We split it into 6 different segments because we're not going to come up with funding for close to $500 million all in one shot. So it's broken down into 6 different pieces and construct those segments at different times, starting back in 2014 with the very first segment. The segments that you see in green are the ones that are currently complete. There are 3 segments that are complete to date. The ones you see in red on the screen are ones that are currently under construction. And then there is one more segment that we're currently designing up to the northern part of Springfield. Those are going to be combined into one project and go to construction later next year. The overall project is going to be close to $500 million. It's about 60% underway right now, with almost 3/4 of the funding that we have received for the project. I'm going to play a short video here. It's about 6 minutes long, but it's going to give a drone overview of the entire rail project through Springfield that's currently under construction. And we fly this on a monthly basis to bring both the residents and stakeholders up to speed, along with agencies like IDOT, FRA, ICC, as well as politicians. So try to play this now.
The Springfield Rail Improvements Project is a 6-mile railroad corridor along the 10th Street Rail Corridor through Springfield, Illinois, that will provide 2 sets of tracks for both the Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern railroads. The project includes 6 new underpasses along the 10th Street corridor and 2 new underpasses and 1 overpass on the 19th Street Canadian National Rail corridor. There will also be railroad bridges replaced at 4 existing underpass locations, including 5th and 6th Streets and at South Grand Avenue and Cook Street. The flight begins at the southern terminus of the project at Stanford Avenue and proceeds north to the northern terminus of the project near Sangamon Avenue. Beginning at the southern terminus of Stanford Avenue, the corridor extends north to the Union Pacific-Norfolk Southern divergence. The Union Pacific tracks, along with Amtrak, continue north along 3rd Street, and the Norfolk Southern tracks curve to the east, then continue north along the 10th Street corridor. Usable Segment 4 construction began in the fall of 2019 and was completed in early October of 2022. This segment includes 2 new bridges for both the Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern trains over 5th and 6th Streets. The Norfolk Southern is currently constructing a second track within this segment. It's anticipated the second track will be completed in the fall of 2022. Usable Segment 2 extends from 6th Street to South Grand Avenue and includes 2 new underpasses at Ash Street and Laurel Street. The Ash Street underpass construction began in the fall of 2017 and was completed in November 2019. The Laurel Street underpass began construction in the fall of 2019 and was completed on September 20th, 2021 and opened to traffic. The sub-ballast grading for the Norfolk Southern track bed is complete from Ash Street to South Grand Avenue. Usable Segment 5 extends from South Grand Avenue to Capitol Avenue and includes bridge replacements similar to the 5th and 6th Street bridges at South Grand Avenue and Cook Street. Construction began in July of 2021 and is anticipated to be completed in 2023. The Norfolk Southern Bridge over South Grand Avenue is complete. The contractor is completing retaining wall work along South Grand Avenue. The sub-ballast has been placed and compacted for the Norfolk Southern Rail Corridor from South Grand Avenue to Capitol Avenue. The Norfolk Southern is expected to begin track construction for Usable Segment 5 and have the tracks shifted to the new track alignment by the end of 2022. Usable Segment 3 extends from Capitol Avenue to Madison Street and includes 2 new underpasses at Madison and Jefferson Streets and the construction of the new Springfield-Sangamon County Transportation Center. Capitol Avenue is currently under construction and is expected to be completed in the fall of 2022. A jack and bore operation for a new sewer is currently underway at Monroe Street. The new SMTD transfer facility will be on the east side of the tracks, and the new Amtrak station and parking garage will be located on the west side of the tracks, with a pedestrian bridge connecting the 2 facilities. The parking lot for the bus transfer facility is completed. Transportation Center construction began in August 2021 for the SMTD transfer station and will be completed in early 2023. Construction for the Amtrak station and parking garage will begin in mid-2023 and will be completed in 2025. Usable Segment 3 construction has begun with a completion date targeted in late 2024. Both underpasses at Madison and Jefferson Streets will be constructed at the same time during a 14-month closure of Madison and Jefferson between 9th and 11th, starting in April of 2023. Usable Segment 1 extends from Madison Street to Carpenter Street and included a new underpass at Carpenter Street. The 1908 Race Riot archaeological site was discovered in this segment. The Carpenter Street underpass construction began in the summer of 2014 and was completed on time and under budget in the summer of 2016. Usable Segment 6 extends from Carpenter Street to Ridgely Avenue and includes a new underpass at North Grand Avenue. The Union Pacific tracks and Amtrak continue north to Chicago, and the Norfolk Southern tracks continue east towards Decatur. This segment includes a new railroad corridor from Phillip Street to Ridgely Avenue, with construction scheduled to begin in late 2023 and a completion date in late 2025. The new underpass at North Grand Avenue includes a bridge for the Union Pacific Railroad. An overpass carrying North Grand Avenue over the Norfolk Southern and Illinois and Midland Railroad near Robin Roberts Stadium will also be constructed as part of Usable Segment 6. The rail corridor will bisect the EPA building along North Grand Avenue. The rail corridor will continue north immediately east of the Bingo Hall. The northern terminus of this segment is at the existing Union Pacific tracks north of Ridgely Avenue near Sangamon Avenue. After Usable Segment 6 is complete, the Union Pacific and Amtrak will begin operating their trains along the new 10th Street Rail Corridor in late 2025.
Okay, so that, again, we do those drone videos on a monthly basis to update everybody where construction's at on the project, which is a great job trying to help people understand the overall project and kind of give a bird's eye view of the construction that's going on. So the rail corridor itself is going to be about 140 feet wide. 2 tracks for the Union Pacific, 1 track all the way through the corridor for the Norfolk Southern, but a part of the corridor is going to have 2 tracks, probably about, I'd say, half to 2/3 of the corridor will. But there'll be enough room in the overall corridor if the Norfolk Southern ever wanted that second track to go all the way through, there would be enough width for them. On both sides, there's going to be maintenance roads, a maintenance road for the Union Pacific, also a maintenance road for the Norfolk Southern as well. The rail itself is a 136-pound rail. The Union Pacific will utilize concrete ties. Norfolk Southern will utilize wooden ties. So there's a little bit of difference between the 2 railroads, but nothing too substantial. On both sides of the corridor, on the far left-hand and far right-hand side along the right-of-way, there's going to be a 6-foot black ornamental fence along the entire corridor, and that's to really help keep the pedestrians and people out of the corridor so we don't have any fatalities or anything like that. It's a huge safety issue. And that is one of the number one issue right now for the Illinois Commerce Commission is pedestrians trespassing on rail corridors. It's actually more of a problem than just vehicles getting accidents with trains. So the very first project was the Carpenter Street Underpass. That's Usable Segment 1. It's kind of in the middle upper part of the screen. That's adjacent to the St. John's Hospital and down the street a little bit, Memorial Hospital. That particular underpass was decided we wanted to construct it first to give access to the medical district at the very beginning of the project, and it would also be utilized as a detour route when we're constructing some of the other underpasses adjacent to it. It does have a permanent road closure as well as part of that project. There are many different aspects of the particular underpass I want to talk about from a safety reason. One thing during our public outreach was people wanted to feel safe going through an underpass, whether they're walking or driving. So lighting was of huge importance. So these underpasses have a lot of lighting on them to help people feel safe as they're either walking or driving through the underpass. In addition to that, the sidewalks on the 2 sides are elevated. And what that does is the roads go down at a very steep grade, about 8%. Those sidewalks are held at a shallower grade to help meet ADA requirements. So those are accessibility requirements for people in wheelchairs. So that makes it a lot easier for those people with handicap to be able to go through the corridor. In addition to that, we took into account aesthetics, kind of have somewhat of a uniform theme throughout the entire project of what the underpasses would look like. And kind of the one thing I want to point out, there's a lot of different disciplines that are involved with a project of this magnitude. You obviously have the rail aspect of it, track design, the alignment for the tracks, all that kind of part. But you also have structural engineering that goes into the bridges and retaining walls, geotechnical engineering, electrical engineering for lighting. There is a pump station I'll talk about a little bit, mechanical engineers that are involved with that. traffic engineers for modeling to make sure that we've got enough lanes of traffic, and also looking at some of the congestion delays and stuff like that. So there's lots of different disciplines that go into a project of this magnitude. One of the biggest complaints we got from people when we were doing the kind of initial planning, why in the world would you put an underpass in? They flood. You know, now we're going to, this corridor that we want to be able to have people go from, you know, the east side to the west side or west side to east side. When it floods, you can't get anywhere. So one of the things we implemented in as part of this project is there's about 45,000 gallons of storage at this particular underpass. So when it rains, the water goes into these large storage tanks that are drilled down deep into the ground, and it holds that. The pump you see here is one of the pumps that was being installed for that underpass. There's 2 pumps. It's set up for 2 pumps in case one goes down. Then you still have another pump that's able to run. There'll always be a maintenance point when some of these pumps have to be pulled out and maintained, so you'll still have a separate pump there to be able to pump the water out. This particular location also has redundant electrical feeds, so if the power goes out in a certain part of the town, there's another power supply that actually comes to this pump station. That was an item that was incorporated in the pump station by the hospitals. So that was very important. We wanted a thoroughfare for people to get from one part of town to the other to be able to access hospitals during a time of emergency, especially if the power's out. And when the power's out, usually it's a bad storm and a lot of rain. So a lot of design and effort went into this. That was the very first underpass. The other new underpasses we have also have this additional type of water storage as well. Springfield had its largest rainfall event a week, might have been 2 weeks before the underpass was opened up for use, and it was the only underpass in town that did not flood. It's got about 6.5 inches of rain in an hour and a half. So while people couldn't use it because it wasn't opened up yet, it was the only underpass in town that did not flood. That was the very first one that we had constructed as part of this project.
Could I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So this was one of the first things that struck me, having grown up in a town with an underpass that frequently flooded. So
Yes.
I was interested in it. So you basically got a very large catch basin beneath that.
That is correct. It's
Okay.
off to the side of the underpass, and what it is, it's almost like 3 large manholes that go down into the rock about 40 to 45 feet down. So when the water goes into the underpass, it goes just through typical concrete pipe over to those and then drops down into those 3 storage chambers, and they're connected to each other at the very bottom.
Is this something that has been done before, or did you guys kind of invent this?
So the concept of the 3 storage chambers using kind of the concrete type manholes, we just kind of came up with that. But there is other locations, you know, that throughout the country where they try to hold storm water. So that concept isn't unique. And many underpasses do have pumps and things like that to be able to get the water out of the underpass and up to the storm sewer system, but a lot of those don't have storage. So kind of the design, I'll say, is a little unique, but the overall concept with pumps is very common. But when you add the 2 together, you end up with a really good product that can help minimize, I'll say minimize the amount of time that an underpass can flood, because Mother Nature will always win at some point. So,
Thank you.
yes. Within that first project, there is a potential for a site where homes were burnt during the 1908 race riots in Springfield. That we kind of figured that out during our phase 1 environmental planning of the project. And so during construction, we had the contractor, one of the very first things they do is go out and remove pavement in part of the area where the tracks were going to be so an archaeologist can come in and investigate. During their investigation, they did uncover homes that were burnt during the 1908 race riots in Springfield. What's significant about the race riots in 1908 is that led to the catalyst of the formation of the NAACP as we know it today. So it was a very historic event that occurred in Springfield, Abraham Lincoln's hometown, that led to the formation of the NAACP. So one of the things we had to do when we came across this was the rail alignment had to shift a little bit. Not a significant shift, but kind of a minor shift toward the east to avoid some of these homes. In addition to that, had to go in and do investigation and dig out any artifacts that could be within those homes, foundations, and cellars and things that they had. So this just kind of shows one of the houses that was complete. This is what it looked like underground. It had just concrete pavement over the top of it. So this is what was below a parking lot. One of the artifacts they found, I think this is really one of the most significant ones. Very, very interesting. There's a medal that was given out during the Spanish-American War to the 8th Regiment. The 8th Regiment was comprised of African Americans. So this was found during the investigation, the archaeology dig of that site. So quite a kind of a historic, significant finding that we came across. So the next segment of the project was usable segment 2, and that is new underpasses at both Ash and Laurel Street, along with a lot of track construction work as well. One thing I kind of want to talk a little bit about here is the staging of how the track is constructed and these underpasses. That's one thing when you get into the construction aspect of things, you've got to be able to keep the rail lines open for the railroad during construction. That is very critical to them, and have very small shutdown periods when they tie the tracks in. So where you see the construction going on right now, where they're getting ready to construct a new bridge, the existing track used to be at that location. Adjacent to that, we constructed the new bridge that you see in the screen with the 2 tracks over it. And then the trains are shifted to that structure, and then that allows the contractor to go in and remove the old track where it's at and construct a second bridge. So there's one bridge for the Norfolk Southern, one bridge for the Union Pacific. This is what it looks like, very similar to the other underpass, but it doesn't have the center pier. So we're trying to kind of keep a common theme of aesthetics throughout the project. This is a typical at-grade crossing in Springfield. This is Laurel Street. This was also converted from an at-grade crossing to an underpass. The one thing I want to point out is if you're somebody with, in a wheelchair trying to go down the sidewalks here, it'd be terrible, liable to get stuck. It's not a very good path for those people. This is what it looks like now. You've got the elevated sidewalks where it's a nice, slow, gentle grade down, railings that separates the pedestrians from the ledge there. And then this photograph was taken about 2 days before it opened up. The striping still isn't complete on the road, but we do have striping. And that's just happened to be out there taking a picture right when Norfolk Southern had a train coming across the bridge. The next segment was usable segment 4, and again, this had track construction as well on it, along with redoing existing bridges on that corridor. So that's a picture of what the existing bridge looked like. 5th and 6th Street are both parallel one-way streets in Springfield, the most significant north-south routes through the heart of Springfield as far as traffic volume goes. That's what the new bridge is going to look like, both at both 5th and 6th Street. So it'll go from one bridge for the Norfolk Southern for a single track to a double wide bridge to hold 2 tracks, and then you have a second bridge as well for the Union Pacific. So there's a lot of track construction that's required as part of this project. One of the most significant items is the bridge itself. The beams had to be 13 foot, 2 inches deep. That is a little taller than this ceiling is. So we're talking huge beams for these bridges. They're about 155 foot span length and hold up 2 tracks. So it requires 2 of these bridges. It's a through plate girder. Now the bottom plate and the top plate that make the flanges of those beams are about 48 inches to close to 50, I think up to 54 inches wide and 4-inch thick plate. So you're talking some steel that is very, very thick. They weigh about 300,000 pounds each, those beams. So during a 10-day shutdown of the road, the bridges were constructed. They had 3 cranes come in to lift up the various pieces to be able to build these bridges for the track. Once the girders are up, they swing floor beams in, and then that kind of comprises your structure. It's almost like a U-shaped type bridge that you drive through. It's called a through plate girder type bridge. Once those pieces are on, then they waterproof the bridge. Those are the different colored coatings that you see here. It's a spray applied membrane. Once that is down, there is a kind of a drainage trough that goes across it, and then they place the ballast for the rail corridor on top of that. And here in the photo I want to point out is that Norfolk Southern has built their track. You can kind of see it right there on the far right hand side of the picture, right up to the bridge. So they're within a matter of a day or two of getting to the bridge and then be able to just build their track right across it. So that was the 6th Street Bridge you're looking at. This is the 5th Street Bridge, very similar. Here you can see the 3 cranes that it takes to hold up these massive amounts of steel to construct the bridge. In this particular one, this was at the very tail end of it. Had a snowstorm come through, similar weather to what Champaign gets, but it got down to about 0 that night. This is during a 10-day closure of the road where the contractor's working both day and night, and they're out there welding some of the deck plates down at this point on that bridge. So this, I think this was around maybe 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening on a Friday or Saturday now. Can't remember which night it was, but it was out there snowing, and construction workers, you can't say enough. They're hardy men and women that are out there working and work through the elements. So pretty amazing. With respect to the shutdown, so the contractor, if they didn't get the bridge completed in time, had a $6,500 penalty per hour that the road wasn't open. So we put a pretty significant penalty because this is a major thoroughfare for Springfield and wanted to get that road opened up as quick as possible. You can just see some of the facts there regarding the bridge: 13-foot tall girders, 19,000 bolts that they had to install in the matter of that 10-day shutdown, and then about 3,000 feet of weld out in the field that had to be placed too. This is going to be a short video. So after the bridges were built, the Norfolk Southern then brought in their rail train, hopefully this plays, to deliver the rail to the site. So this is just a very short video clip of the rail showing up. But basically the train came in and then they laid the rail down and dropped off the quarter-mile segments of the rail. After the rail was there, then they had a contractor construct the track itself. So they brought the ties in. They go out, first thing they do is survey the alignment for the track. Then they'll go out and set the ties down, and they place those. They have a truck that they utilize to set them down, and then some guys kind of shifting them around to get them into alignment. Then they pull the rail up onto those ties. After the rail's on the ties, they spike it down and start bringing all the ballast in, and then raising up the track to the right level. This was the first train that happened to go across the new track and the new bridges. Just happened to be out there that day and got to see that happen. A rendering of what the underpass or what the bridge looked like in the rail corridor, and then kind of a final product of all 4 bridges constructed. This is pretty recent. This was probably taken about maybe a little over a month ago now. So this corridor, this usable segment 4, is now complete. Just had a ribbon cutting for it a few weeks ago. Senator Durbin was there, along with the mayor of the city of Springfield, Mayor Langfelder, Juliana Stratton, the Lieutenant Governor, Omer Osmond, the Secretary of the Transportation, and then State Representative Sue Shear was there as well, you see in the photograph. The current segment that's under construction is usable segment 5, and that's the reconstruction of 2 reconstruction of existing underpasses at Cook and South Grand. This is South Grand that you see in the picture here. This was the underpass that I had a photograph of as an old picture of from the 1930s. So now we're getting ready. You can see the concrete slope walls that were a part of that. It's obviously in the slope walls are in pretty poor shape, but what I want to show you is the most important thing. There's a rail yard just to the north, and then this kind of shows how it's staged. So you had the tracks that are on the left-hand side. The contractor builds the underpass, the new bridge on the right-hand side. Once that is complete, and we're to that point now with the sub-ballast down and everything. The Norfolk Southern's going to build track across the new bridge, shift their trains onto it, and then they'll be operating on the new bridge, tear out the old bridge, put a new bridge in for the Union Pacific, and then complete the rest of the reconstruction of that underpass. The next segment is usable segment 3, and it's currently under construction as well, and it is brand new underpasses at both Madison and Jefferson Street, along with at-grade crossings that are being reconstructed as well. So north is to the left on this picture. You can see the pink represents the 2 alignments for the Norfolk Southern tracks. The blue are the 2 alignments for the Union Pacific tracks. Madison and Jefferson Street are kind of right there in the center of the picture. There'll be new underpasses that'll go in between 9th and 11th Street, and then there's at-grade crossings that'll be reconstructed at Washington. Adams Street will be closed at the at-grade crossing, Monroe Street, and Capitol Avenue as well. This is just a quick picture of the detour route. One of the things we do is reach out to the community as part of the project, create maps like this to be able to share, to make things easier for people to understand where the detour routes this is at. This is a part of a press release that will go out once those underpasses are once Madison and Jefferson are closed for construction. The aerial photo here is of the Capitol Avenue at-grade crossing under construction. That at-grade crossing is going to be opened up here in the middle of November. There's actually bricks that are going to go on top of the concrete pavement, and then they do an HMA surface right where the tracks go through. So that's going to be completed here very shortly. In addition to that, you can see some of the work for the rail corridor that's going on as well. A lot of the grading and there's a lot of drainage work that's involved too, to be able to cut ditches in, have a lot of pipes that cross, especially in an urban area where there's storm sewer that's everywhere. The last segment of the project is usable segment 6, and this is the very last piece that's going to go to a construction letting. And when I say construction letting, that's when the project bids. That will be in November of next year. This will have a new underpass for the Union Pacific at North Grand. That's the usable segment 6B portion, and then a new overpass that goes over the Norfolk Southern and Illinois Midland Railroad, along with some permanent road closures as well as more at-grade crossings that have to be reconstructed. This is just a rendering of one of the overpasses that'll go over the Norfolk Southern and Illinois Midland tracks. This is taken kind of looking, there's a baseball stadium called Roberts Ballpark in Springfield, and this is kind of standing, up in the air at that stadium looking out at the underpass. We wanted to make this look somewhat similar to a lot of the underpasses through the town. Just another view of it on top of the bridge. There'll be a multi-use trail to allow both bicyclists and pedestrians to utilize that to go across the tracks. And then the other part of the project is the underpass. This is the part where you saw in the video where the tracks will end up going right through the IEPA building. So that building, just the middle of it, is what is going to be demolished. The part that is on the right-hand side is going to remain as a warehouse. The part that is on the left-hand side will remain as office spaces. So currently, the state of Illinois, working with CDB and CMS, has multiple projects where they are reconstructing some office spaces in Springfield to get them ready to house the people that occupy those buildings. So come end of 2023, the people that are within those buildings will be relocated to other facilities, and then the middle portion of that building can be demolished. There will be an underpass along North Grand Avenue, and then a bridge for the Union Pacific where the tracks will go over the top of the road, similar to the other locations. Now, as part of the project, there's a current Amtrak station on the 3rd Street corridor right now. So if the tracks are going to shift from 3rd Street over to 10th Street, we've got to build a new Amtrak station. So the rest of this I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about is of the new transportation center. The large brick building that's on the kind of the right-hand side is the Sangamon County Complex. It's where the courthouse and jail is in Springfield. It's existing right now. The Amtrak station and parking garage are going to connect directly to that and extend to the north. So that'll be on the west side of the tracks. You'll have the tracks that are right behind the building, kind of hard to see in the photograph, but they're right and kind of in the middle there. And then on the far east side of the tracks is SMTD, that's Sangamon County Mass Transit District. That's where the bus service is at in Springfield. So this new transportation center will have the buses there and Amtrak, which we currently don't have those at the same location right now in Springfield. Along with what was just announced yesterday is Greyhound is actually going to utilize the SMTD facility as well. So they're going to have 2 buses that come to that facility on a daily basis. So pretty exciting news on that aspect of it. This is a rendering of what it'll look like down on the platform where the passengers will be boarding the train. Generally, we're going to try to have most of the trains that the Amtrak and the railroads will coordinate this, but most of them adjacent to the Amtrak station on that closest rail. That way they can just walk right out of the station, board the train, and they don't have to get to this middle platform. In the event that Amtrak has to be on the other rail, there is a elevator. People will be able to go up across the tracks and back down, or stairs to utilize to be able to board the train from either side. Baggage will be also brought across if they have to go to this other side. Baggage will be brought across the bridge and through the elevators through a little electric carts that'll kind of run on the inside of the building. There's going to be a mural as well on the back side of the Sangamon County Transportation Center, SMTD, right here. It's going to have some historical figures from Springfield on that. So that'll be actually, I think, sometime next year is when the construction of that aspect of the mural will start. Within the building, there'll be a cafe, a large stairway, and the Amtrak station. This is what they call the county square. So this will be an area where off to the, you can't really see it here, but if you go to the right, you'd be able to enter in the Sangamon County complex, the existing building that's there. Or if you go to the far left here, you'd just be able to go straight into the large parking garage that has about 600 spots for vehicles. On the second floor of the transportation center, as part of the project, thought it'd be a great idea to incorporate artifacts and kind of a history of the 1908 race riots. So some of the things that were dug up within the race riot site are going to actually be on display at this location. So it's kind of a way to incorporate some of that into the project. The top level is where the pedestrians would go across the bridge that goes across the tracks and then back down to the other platform. Now this is on the far east side of the tracks. This is where the Mass Transit District is, and this facility is under construction right now. I've got some actual real photographs of what it looks like under construction. The parking lot itself is complete. You can see how many buses are there at one time, so it's a very busy facility. The building itself is going to have some office space and restrooms and things for the drivers, kind of a break room type area. And then part of what's being built will be the kind of the termination of the pedestrian crossing that'll go across the entire track width. So right here's where the tracks are at. This will be the building. So when you come across the pedestrian crossing, it'll tie right into that. Just another photograph of where they're at on the construction. This is probably, I think, about 3 weeks old, that photograph. But moving right along, they're hoping to get this part of the transportation center complete by spring of next year. And then next summer, they will go to construction on the west side part. That's the part that has the Amtrak station, parking garage, and the overhead crossing that goes over the tracks, along with the associated platform for Amtrak, the passengers to board. As part of the project, during kind of the very beginning stages, this was part of our community outreach. We developed a grow our own plan. This is where we tried to get more minorities in the community involved with the project, hopefully steering them towards engineering. So we've had a program that we developed in collaboration with Sangamon County and the City of Springfield, where try to reach out to minority students in high school, get them interested involved in engineering with the hope that they do go to engineering and come back and have a very good job. This is one of our participants in the program. He was out in the field. He's actually torquing bolts down at this project. So making sure they had the right tension on the bridge. This has been a nationally recognized program through the entire country, where we're featured in ACEC magazine. So we've received lots of national recognition for it, have had a lot of students come through the program on a yearly basis. And we also bring them over right to here to the University of Illinois at the Engineering Open House as well. And then they're involved with the, get involved with the Rail Tech program out the open house to kind of teach them some things about different aspects of engineering. So it's been a very good program and a way that has led to us being able to hire some students through that program. So some of the keys to success of this massive project, you know, it's not, it's a, like I said, it's a lot of different disciplines, a lot of different areas, a lot of things. You know, we've, obviously there's land acquisition involved, engineering involved, construction involved, but one of the biggest things is don't ever give up, because you're always going to run into challenges. Like the archaeology site, I'll use an example. You know, we run into an archaeology site, oh my gosh, what do we do? Is the project dead in the water? No, you find a way to get through that. That's where we looked at shifting the tracks over a little bit more, do some mitigation of the archaeology site, dig up any artifacts that are there so you can get the environmental clearance to proceed and continue on with the project. So there's many things like that that you run into. That's one of the most significant ones, but you know, on a weekly, monthly basis, there's always challenges. Don't ever give up when you're, or you know, the project will stop or slow down. You also need a project champion. With this project, we've been very lucky to have, I would call Senator Durbin as maybe one of the champions of this project, who's been very helpful in trying to get this project complete. Without him and some of the support of others, the project probably wouldn't have gone anywhere from the beginning. We always keep our elected stakeholders involved, and our elected officials and key stakeholders involved. We have monthly meetings with the steering committee. That involves the City of Springfield, IDOT, Sangamon County, Illinois Commerce Commission. The railroads are a part of it, along with local, state, and federal politicians as well, or their staffers are involved with those meetings. Those, we show the drone flight each month so they can see the progress. We report the financial aspect of the project, whether we're on budget, on schedule, that sort of thing, and give them just an overall update of the project to keep them, you know, not engaged in the project, but also knowing about the project. So if they get questions asked from constituents, then they can help try to answer those questions. Identify funding sources is another key issue. If you can't find the funding, you're not going to build it. Doesn't matter. Like I said, the project's close to $500 million. We've been able to help the City of Springfield secure 6 federal grants for close to $1 million. IDOT has contributed $122 million to the project, very substantial. Illinois Commerce Commission has also contributed a very significant amount towards the project, along with City of Springfield and Sangamon County. So there's lots of different funding sources. I think at one time, I think we're getting close to maybe 30 different funding sources for this project. So lots of different things to keep track of. Always provide timely responses to requests. The biggest, you know, if the public reaches out, asks a question, get back with them. You know, don't put them off a week or 2 weeks, because then they think you're just, you know, don't really care about them. Respond to their questions, listen to them. You know, if they have any concerns or anything, try to help give them feedback and make the best of whatever may be presented. In addition to that, when you're working with contractors, you never want to try to slow the contractor down by delaying a review of something. So always stay up on top of things, keep submittals going through at a very timely manner. That'll help out with the construction in the field and also help keep the project on track, which is very significant now with the inflation that we have. Trying to keep on schedule is huge money. If you delay a project of this magnitude a year, from Q1 of 2021 to Q1 of 2022, FHWA Heavy Construction Cost Index. This is the index that they utilize to figure out how much construction costs are rising, was a 20% increase. So in 1 year, construction costs have gone up 20%. We don't have current numbers for quarters 2 and 3 of this year, but they'll be posted soon, but we anticipate those keep going up. So any delays in the project, if you can avoid those and get the job done earlier, means significant money when you're talking 20% increases on a project that's $500 million, close to 500. And always get public support. That's from the very beginning of the project, we're able to get public support, and when the public's on your team, makes the project go very smooth. And this project within the city has gathered great support amongst the residents, residences. Even the people that homes are being bought from are very supportive of the project. A lot of them want their homes bought, believe it or not. You might think people are, no, I don't want to get bought, want to fight it, but we've kind of almost found the exact opposite of that. So with that, that brings me an end to the presentation, and would be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
Thank you, Michael. Fantastic presentation, and we definitely have time for some questions, both from people here as well as there's a number of questions coming in from online. So we'll first ask if anybody has questions here.
So we have had to go through the condemnation process on a few of the properties. I would say less than maybe 5% of the properties have had to go through that process, probably in that area. So it's something that's utilized on a very limited basis. Usually we can come to an agreement with the homeowners or businesses.
I'm just wondering about foresight, what you're thinking about for future expansion. Was that included in the plans? And also, can you explain why CN was excluded? Is it just traffic volumes? Is there just not projections for that?
Yeah, so as far as the foresight on the project, the 3rd Street corridor has a single track on it, and the 10th Street corridor has a single track. So what we're looking at doing is bringing 2 tracks for each one of those corridors in to allow for continued increase in train volumes. So that was kind of the overall aspect of the project, is to allow for those additional trains that are anticipated to be able to handle that traffic in the future. The 19th Street corridor is, none of that is currently funded as part of the project, but what will occur at those crossings if funding is obtained is new grade separations, so underpasses. That's the corridor that had the least amount of train volume on it. So that's kind of why it's at the end of the project, looking at if there is funding obtained to do those underpasses at those crossings, but there is a chance that the train traffic, that particular line supplies a coal-fired power plant just south of Springfield, Illinois. That's the majority of the trains that utilize that line, and that plant's going to be decommissioned in a few years from now, so the train volume is going to drop down significantly. So that's why funding necessarily hasn't been obtained for that particular portion of the project at this point.
Here. Besides the track shifting at the archaeological site, are there any measures planned, like for vibration reduction or something like that, to protect the archaeological site?
For vibration reduction? Is
Yes.
that what you said? Okay. Yes, we did at the very beginning of the project, there was a vibration study that was completed. And what we did was go out and there was a consultant that we utilized from the East Coast. They came out and kind of did some baseline vibration measurements along the corridor and did a study to determine that the new corridor itself would not increase those vibrations. Now, part of the things that cause vibrations can be sound, like train horn sounds, things like that. They don't necessarily shake the ground or anything, but you can kind of feel it still. Part of the project's going to a quiet zone, so that helps reduce that aspect of it as well. At the end of the project, the same people that kind of got the baseline measurements are going to come back out and double check and make sure that the new corridor is still within that threshold of vibration that they expected. And basically the vibrations on this corridor are what they consider at the maximum level, if you're very close to the track, a nuisance level, but doesn't create any structural damage to buildings or anything like that adjacent to it.
Other questions here? I know I had one early on, but I forgot it. So.
It's okay.
This question regards the demographics of the 77 people that were displaced. Can you comment on how they were compensated or where they'll be displaced to?
Yes, so the residents that were displaced, we have to go through a land acquisition process that meets all federal government guidelines. Basically, the home or residence or business there's an appraisal that is completed, and that has to follow federal government requirements. In addition to that, there is a review appraisal, an independent party that has to do an appraisal on that property as well. That way you're not just looking at one appraisal, there's a separate one that's done to confirm that amount. That also has to go through federal government requirements as well. So once the appraisals are complete, then it goes to the City of Springfield and an offer can be made to the resident for that property. In addition to just buying their home or business, whatever it is, it's similar to what we'd kind of call as a damage, but it's more of a moving expense or displacement expense for those people that they get as well, and that follows federal government guidelines too. That way, when they're moved out of their home, they get an additional X amount of money to be able to cover the cost of the move.
Okay. Next question is, what's the projected growth in the area where the new corridor is being installed, and will the reduction from 68 to 38 grade crossings be affected by this growth?
So the overall growth through the City of Springfield, which the medical district borders the 10th Street corridor, like I said earlier, there's expected $1 billion, up to $1 billion in growth just from the medical district itself. There's going to be other locations through this corridor that we're going to expect to probably see some commercial development takes place. I know the county has some projects that they're looking at doing potentially along the rail corridor as well that could help spur on economic growth, but we think it's going to be a very big catalyst for the city. And then specifically, it allows the residents on the east and west sides to be able to travel back and forth easier with vehicles, or whether they're walking, to be able to get to different businesses, hospitals, things like that, and just make life a lot better for them.
Okay. And I should mention, we've got over 120 people registered for this seminar from 8
Great.
different nations. So this is
Wow.
an international seminar. Next question is, will the NS Yard return, or have those functions been relocated?
Yeah, so the NS Yard will not return. They are going to have a second track at that location, and that is one spot of the corridor that is even going to be wide enough if they wanted a third track to be able to put kind of two sidings in right there. They have been, as part of the acquisition of the project, they were compensated for that yard, and they're looking at potentially either constructing something somewhere else to add in that additional capacity, but I don't think that has happened yet.
Okay. Were there specific reasons to keep certain at-grade crossings open?
Yes, the reasons at-grade crossings were open, we look at two things. The biggest driving factor is how much travel is there, how much vehicles are on that crossing per day. That really dictates whether it goes to, say, an underpass or an overpass or maintains as an at-grade crossing. But we did a traffic study for the entire corridor, and that really kind of helped determine which at-grade crossings we wanted to keep and utilize for the motorists to still be able to use. And generally, the ones that are at-grade crossings have lower traffic volumes.
Okay. Another question, I think this is also related to the yard. Was there any environmental remediation required at the yard or with the project in general?
Yes, through, this is, the whole corridor is really kind of through what I call a core of Springfield that has been around a lot of time, a lot of industrial developments in some of these areas. And there has been what is kind of classified as, call it hazardous waste. Some of it isn't bad enough where it can still remain on the project. Other certain soil has to be removed and excavated and put off site at a registered landfill that accepts that type of waste. So yes.
In terms of estimating project scope and costs, how has the accuracy of the estimates improved as the project progressed? Were there project elements that were unanticipated or found to be overestimated?
So the project itself, when we completed the environmental aspect back in 2012, we had set a project cost at 2010 is $315 million, but that is based on 2010 costs. What we have done is we know what the escalation is through time, and that escalation, we're actually trending less. If you take that $315 million and escalate it up to today's money, we're actually trending less than that amount, even though the project is close to $500 million, just because of the significant escalation that has occurred. And again, just here recently, we've seen in 1 year, 20% increase in construction costs.
Was any consideration given to removing the freight traffic to a new corridor outside the city where fewer grade separations would have been required?
Yes, that was looked at back in the phase one aspect of the project. So there's several reasons why that was ruled out. Along kind of the outskirts of Springfield, and the part that made sense was going to the east side. There's more environmental constraints along that outer edge where you have to deal with a lake. There's an interstate along there as well, and a lot of additional, there's more right-of-way that's required, and the construction cost actually goes up substantially too. In addition to that, when you move the tracks around Springfield, it adds time to freight and passenger rail times as well, because it's not as a direct shot. So now all of a sudden you're increasing the times of both the freight and passenger rail, and that's a negative benefit for that particular aspect.
Okay. This person starts by complimenting great presentation, which I agree with. On the north end of the project, why build through the site of the EPA building instead of following the NS to the I&M to get back to the current UP corridor?
So the direct path, there is a shorter direct path to go straight through the EPA building to get back over to the UP corridor, and that's why that was followed. In fact, they are right. You could go veer off to the east a little bit, get on to the I&M and kind of come back, but that takes the Union Pacific out of the way a little bit, would add additional travel time too. And that particular crossing that they're talking about is where that bridge, the overpass bridge I had a rendering of, where it went over the Norfolk Southern, Illinois Midland. That's where the UP would be coming into, and now you've got 3 different railroads there, and it would be a very massive crossing at that location.
What has been the biggest challenge working with the freight railroads? Do you have any thoughts on lessons learned or advice for future projects?
So communication, I'd say, is probably the most key element. We work with the freight railroads on their own internal projects throughout the entire country. The biggest thing on this project is we've started meetings with them every other week. So we meet with the Norfolk Southern one week, the next week we meet, and these are virtual meetings, meet with the Union Pacific, and we've just got a list of kind of ongoing items, submittals, things like that that we keep track of to make sure that they're aware of what they need to take a look at and kind of deadlines, and make sure that we're working back and forth and communicating on the project to make sure things get done in a timely manner. And getting things done in a timely manner, I'd say, is probably one of the keyest things with the railroad to try to make that happen.
Got several people asking questions who are quite familiar with this project. Any chances that the Springfield flyover project would be resurrected?
So right now that is with the Federal Railroad Administration in their court, and we're currently not seeing any movement on that. That is a project that is at the very southern end of this project. The Norfolk Southern and the UP cross each other. This is a project that would create a grade separation for the Union Pacific to go over the Norfolk Southern. But no, we're not seeing any movement right now on that particular portion of the project. And that is a whole separate project from this, even though it's just right at the south end. The Springfield Rail Project is led by the City of Springfield. IDOT is one that was leading the flyover project.
Okay. Next question. What will happen to the 3rd Street corridor?
So we're in the process right now of doing a feasibility study to determine and kind of figure out, what's the best thing for the city through that whole corridor once the 3rd Street tracks are shifted over to the 10th Street. We've had one public meeting on it, and the biggest feedback that we heard is like kind of a very pedestrian-friendly type corridor where people can walk up and down it, ride bikes up and down it, and a little bit more than just a bike path, more like a linear park, especially through the downtown area. And we think that has a potential to really be an economic driver and spur a lot of development right off of that particular corridor.
And somewhat related to that question, and this one's my own, what's going to happen to the old Alton station that Amtrak is using now?
So the Union Pacific is the one that actually owns that particular building. We'll be working with them here on the land acquisition process over this next year. I suspect that they are probably not going to want that building. If they don't, then it'll be a combination of working with the City of Springfield to see if that would be a part of the land acquisition process.
Yeah, I could see that being integrated with that linear park you're talking
Yes,
about.
potentially. Yes, definitely.
What's the maximum speed
So
on the route through town?
yeah, freight is designed for 50 mile an hour, and then the passenger rail is 59.
Okay, and actually it turns out somebody else asked the same question about the Lincoln Depot. So I think that's all we have online, and we're actually right about out of time anyway. Any more questions from the audience here?
Since the topic of ownership came up, I was going to ask a question. The 3rd Street alignment, is that something that Union Pacific will transfer to the City of Springfield in kind of compensation for getting the new infrastructure on the new alignment, or how is that kind of ownership of infrastructure going to happen on the new alignment?
So the Norfolk, I'm going to start with the Norfolk Southern part first, because we literally just closed on property negotiation for that. The City of Springfield is purchasing the property to widen out the rail corridor along 10th Street. They have purchased the property all the way through the Norfolk Southern part, and are in the process of creating plats and things to transfer any property that was acquired there over to the Norfolk Southern. Property that the Norfolk Southern has that would be part of the Union Pacific corridor is being transferred to the city as part of that. So now moving forward, our next step is and then the city had to purchase the rail yard. So it was basically an even swap for the property, and then the rail yard that was there, the city had to purchase that aspect of it. On the Union Pacific side, the city's purchasing the property, whether it was through the Norfolk Southern or other properties. City's purchasing that particular property, as we speak, and then that property, the end goal is to transfer that over to the Union Pacific, and then the Union Pacific to transfer the property on 3rd Street over to the City of Springfield, and basically do that for an even swap. That's the goal, and we'll be working on that over the next year.
Okay, well, if there's no more questions, then I want to thank you again, Mike.
Yes.
Fantastic project and fantastic presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.